You know, when you fly fish lakes, you don't need to leave your river and stream patterns behind. The woolly bugger is an excellent example. Let me show you one of my favorite variations. Hello everyone, I'm Phil Rowley and welcome to my YouTube channel and to my fly tying bench. If you've been here before, thanks for dropping by once again. If this is your first time visiting here, I provide fly tying and fly fishing video content that I hope makes your next day on the water just that little bit more successful. The woolly bugger, as most of you know, is one of the best fly patterns ever created. It works equally well on rivers and streams and lakes. I never leave home without a few stashed in my fly box, and one of my favorites is a thin mint, or my variation of it. Join me, I'll show you how I tie it. So let's tie my thin mint variation. A thin mint woolly bugger has become a very popular fly both on lakes and rivers, and good fly to have in your box. This fly saved my bacon on a shoot I was on with a new fly fisher in northern Saskatchewan. Fish were being a little difficult on that shoot, but this fly in the fall months when we were fishing unlocked the key and helped save the show and catch some fish for us. So into the jaws of the vise, I've got a Daiichi 1760. It's probably the most common size I tie it in is an 8. You could tie it in a 6. A 10 would also be a good color, a good size to tie it in as well. We're going to use some black, or in this case olive tying thread. It doesn't really matter. Tie that in right behind the bead, and the bead I've slid on here is a 1/8 tungsten bead. I tend to fish this fly a little aggressively, meaning fast strips, so the tungsten bead is fine because it's not going to overpower my retrieve. I'm going to fish this primarily 4 to 6 inch strip pause retrieve, so the tungsten helps get the fly down there, but again it's not going to overpower my fly line or my retrieve speed, so it's going to stay out of trouble and stay snag free. So the original thin mint, as I understand it, uses a mixed tail of brown marabou, black marabou, and olive marabou. So that's 3 different applications of marabou you got to put in, and I thought, well, if I can do it in 2 applications, so much the better. And the reason I say 2 is because I can use some of this MFC barred marabou in olive black and brown olive. 2 plumes of that gives me the 3 colors I need. So I've got plume here. We'll start with, it's all going to mix together. This plume here, I'll be able to demonstrate 2 ways of tying in this tail. So this plume here has nice, thick, bushy fibers. It's a more mature plume, if you will, when the bird was harvested. And that gives it this nice fuzzy, a mature plume tends to be thicker stemmed. So I can just come in and strip off maybe an inch or so of fibers. Just stand these fibers up, pull on them to align them, and just strip them right off the side of the stem and gather them up. And I'm going to tie in a tail that's about the length of the shank. So from the eye of the hook to where it falls off in the bend. And you don't need too much, because remember you're going to put 2 applications of marabou, so they're going to add up and build up the bulk. It's better, I like a sparser tail than I do a thicker tail. I just feel it moves better. So I'm just going to trim off the remnants once I've got them measured, and just secure this first application of marabou, lifting up on it, holding those materials under tension to keep them on the side of the shank of the hook I want them to be on, and that's the top here. So I've got them positioned there, take the thread back up, and I've got the black and the olive portion in. And now I'm going to take the olive brown. Now this feather is a little different. It's more fine fibered, not as bushy, so I'm actually going to just tie this in like so by stroking the tips of the feathers together, like so. So I've just stroked the fibers together, a little fine fibered. I might actually strip a little bit off the base, again to reduce the bulk. So what I'm doing here is just taking some of the fibers off the base of the feather. So when I stroke them all together, I've removed some of the fibers. I'm going to have, I'm trying to get a clump that's about the same volume as the first one. So I'm just going to continue to strip these from the base of the feather and just keep that same volume as the initial tie-in, and that looks about right now. So again, I can moisten the fibers a little bit to keep them under control. And I can just align them right on top of the tips of the, even them up with the tips of the first clump I tied in. Get them there, trim this remnant off that's forward of the where I'm going to tie it in. And then just secure this back right on top, right down to the base. Like so. And I don't, you know, to be honest, you could put a little flash in the tail, but for me the fly worked fine with a more muted, subtle tone, and I think that when I talked about in the beginning how it was a kind of a tough day, the fish just didn't seem to like any of the flashy stuff, so the more muted tones seem to work best. So now I'm going to tie in the rib, and I'm going to use some copper wire. Just going to secure that right at the base of the tail, and secure that up the shank. Again, I'm trying to keep, just pull that, there we go. Keep the shank nice and smooth so there's no lumps or bumps. Secure that in. And then for the body on the thin mint is peacock herl. Good old natural peacock herl. So I've taken about 4 or 5 fibers, individual herl, and I'm going to tie them in by the tips. I'm going to even the brittle tips off. Start by securing them just back of the bead. Again, this is all obviously to make sure I got a good tie-in point, but also keeps that underbody that I'm building smooth and even, no lumps and bumps. And I'm just going to come back up right behind the bead, stroke these fibers together, and one wrap directly in front of the other. And because I tied these in as one, they behave as one. So meaning I tied them all in at the same time, so the same thread wraps are securing them. They're just going to behave like they're one strand of material. Come up, tie them off, a couple of wraps over the top, a couple in front, come in, nip the tips off. And then for the body hackle, we're just going to use a brown saddle hackle. And I'm just going to come in and I'm going to just come up, make sure I'm well into the brown portion of the feather here. Strip away. I'm going to tie this in with the, so the fibers of the feather are going to want to flow backward. So I'm just going to tie them in with the most prominently marked, the shiny side of the feather facing forwards. So wet fly style, if you will. So I've got a couple over top, a couple in front. Really lock that stem in, trim off the excess. Come in with my hackle pliers. In this case, my best hackle pliers are my hands. So you can certainly use hackle pliers, but I'm just going to place a couple of turns right at the front. This is just going to help push and disturb water, and then open up the wraps. Nice open turns. Spiral this backwards. Kind of hold that tip of the hackle down. This is where hackle pliers can come in handy because you can use them as a weight. But I'm just going to place a wrap to secure that tip section, and then just wind this wire forward, kind of navigating it through the fibers and trying not to tie any down at all. And this really reinforces anytime I tie woolly bugger style flies, or anytime I'm palmering anything from a saddle hackle in this case, or it could be ostrich herl. I always like doing this because it really reinforces that material. The trout has to shred every segment for this fly to really unravel, so you just get way more mileage out of your fly. So I'm just going to pull and twist, trim out the excess. You could pluck it out too, and then we're just going to build up a little thread there, apply some super glue. Sweep those fibers back so I don't get any glue on them. Wind that in. And 3 to 5 turn whip finish. Snug it up. Come in with my scissors. Trim it off. And there is my thin mint variation. Just a suggestive, buggy-looking fly. They could take it as a leech, a minnow. Who knows? They find it good to eat, and I'm only too happy to serve it to them.